Hello, Nicole, and hello, listeners.
Hello, Warwick. Hello, listeners.
How are you today, Coxie?
I'm cold. It's winter and it's windy, and the westerlies have arrived up here in Brisbane. That signifies that spring is on its way, but not before we die from wind, and it makes us really cold.
I
There-
wonder where this is going.
All right. It's not the wind that is the leading cause of dry skin. Do you know what it is, Warwick?
Oh, no, I don't, Coxie.
Towels.
G'day, I'm Woz.
And I'm Nick, sometimes Coxie, mostly Nick.
This is the Tradies in Business podcast, and we're here to share a bunch of tips, ideas, tactics that you can put in place to get change happening in your trade business right now.
If you're really lucky, we're going to entertain you with a few mum jokes and, more importantly, a bunch of fantastic guests that will educate you in all things you need to know about trade business. But we do promise to do it with a whole bunch of fun along the way.
I'm a self-confessed idiot, so strap yourself in and enjoy another episode.
That's shockingly good in its simplicity. It's like elegant simplicity.
Perfectly.
Oh dear, oh dear. Now I would normally take that and try and come up with some sort of a segue. Actually, I can do it. I'm going to
can.
have a go.
Yep.
Today we're going to talk to somebody who's going to help you prevent getting towelled in business by not having the right legal stuff in place, some of the fundamentals. We talk about it a bit here on the show. And unfortunately, we've heard some stories of people getting really towelled and costing them lots of money. So, Alex Solo, welcome to the podcast.
It is great to be here.
I'm sure. Alex is joining us from Sprint Law. I'm sure we could have come up with our own joke about, a fast lawyer, like a fast speaking lawyer, Sprint Law. Is that name a help or a hindrance for you guys, Alex?
Oh, look, I think it's made us be committed to doing things really quickly, which definitely puts pressure on the team sometimes. But the name itself comes from actually a concept in technology, agile project management, and the idea of law firms are very traditional businesses and they don't really update the way they operate over time. But this concept from technology is, do things in sprints, always evolve, always get better, and that's kind of how we've tried to organize our kind of new type of law firm. But certainly, there's also the speed aspect. Yeah.
Nice. So I'm going to be a bit cheeky, Alex. Does that mean you guys don't charge in 6-minute blocks?
That is correct. We do not charge in 6-minute blocks, and we're very proud of it.
I would be too. I freaking love that. And I bet Warwick didn't believe that was going to be the answer.
Oh, I sort of, it was 50-50 actually.
I love
All
that.
right.
I think that in itself speaks to the forward thinking that is possible in what is, you said it yourself, Alex, a very traditional business.
Indeed, and I think with a name like Sprint Law doing things much faster than traditional lawyers, you probably wouldn't make much money if you build in 6-minute increments. So,
that's right. You have to change your business model.
Exactly.
Well, we've probably got the attention of a few listeners because they're like, "Wow, a lawyer that doesn't charge in 6-minute blocks." Alex, you don't look old enough or stuffy enough to be a solicitor or a lawyer. Can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself and your background and how you came to be here with Sprint Law?
Well, I'm younger than I look because I enjoy what I do, is what I would say. But I've been a lawyer for about 12 years now. I began working at one of the large kind of corporate law firms as a commercial lawyer, corporate lawyer, technology lawyer. In 2017, I left the large corporate law firm life to start Sprint Law with my co-founder, who the two of us met as kind of graduate lawyers working in the corporate law world. The mission really was for smaller businesses to make legal services simple, affordable, accessible. We knew that in Australia, we've got 2 million small businesses across a ton of industries. The vast majority don't consume legal services. When they do, they have a terrible experience. And we just knew doing things online, using technology, killing these 6-minute billing practices and making things affordable, with all of the above tactics, we could really reach that kind of underserved market and bring a fresh way of doing law. So we're, I guess, 7 years in now. have been growing fairly quickly. We've expanded to New Zealand, the UK, and kind of continuing to grow. But really, the whole thing is focused on smaller businesses across a ton of different industries and just really helping them get easy access to legal advice. Yeah.
I like the word easy and law. I don't believe they normally go together, Alex. Certainly
No.
experience. And yet I think when we do things preventatively, it can be really easy, but we tend, I think as a small business owner, because we have this idea that you're going to be charged in 6-minute increments and it's going to be super expensive, we tend not to access the kind of support that we need proactively, and we end up in a bit of trouble before we generally reach out to someone like yourself. Before we get too far into how you've changed things, there's a fundamental question I don't think I've ever asked, and Warwick referenced it before. Is there a difference between a solicitor and a lawyer, or are they essentially the same thing?
Great question. You hear a bunch of different terms for lawyer, like people thrown about: attorney, barrister, solicitor, lawyer. Lawyer in Australia and the UK and the kind of English-based legal system is a general term for a person who is authorized to provide legal advice. And there are two subcategories in that system of lawyers. One is a solicitor, one is a barrister. So both solicitors and barristers are lawyers. Solicitors generally provide advice outside of court. They'll draft documents, or even if there's a dispute, they'll help you before the court proceedings in terms of how to prepare for it and so on. A barrister spends all day in court. They stand up and they get briefed by the solicitor the day before court or whatever, and they'll go fight the case if it needs to go to court. For most businesses, you want to avoid court, so you'll generally be dealing with a solicitor. And the term lawyer is, I guess, a more casual term, which is used to identify. Attorney is not an Australian term; it's used in America to describe what's essentially a lawyer, and they don't have that distinction between solicitors and barristers, which is why you see in those TV shows, like Suits, lawyers starting out in the office and ending up in court in the afternoon. That's not what happens in Australia and the UK, but is more of an American concept. Yeah.
I'm so glad I asked. That's a fascinating answer. I had no idea. And in my experience, I'm thinking back now through all of my own experiences. I have dealt with, essentially both, because I'm dealing with a solicitor and then I go to court and it's a different person. So now I totally understand. I don't think I ever thought to ask that question. And it means that when I am looking for legal services, I also now understand the terminology when, working through, well, who do I talk to? And if I'm asking generally for a referral from someone, which is how I get most of my advice in one way or the other, and when I think about our listeners, they do the same, I also have the right language to get the right person that can help me. I'm not heading off to a barrister who I'm sure they're not even going to take my call, but if they did, they'd be wondering why, and they'd be charging me in the 6-minute increments, I'm sure.
Absolutely. That's spot on. Yeah. It's a solicitor you're generally going to want. And most solicitors are comfortable with the term lawyer as well. Yeah.
Okay. So accessing legal services, that always just feels like I'm about to have a fight with somebody. And that's about the only time I think most trade business owners would speak to a solicitor is there's a problem. Or someone's coming after me, or I want to go after somebody else. And I think that's a big perception amongst consumers, amongst small business owners, that we only talk to you when there's a problem. Now, Nick and I know that there's a different way to do this, and I'm sure you'd love to speak about it, Alex. What should we be doing?
I would. I mean, I would say, we've got now 7,000, 8,000 clients, and the industry, we help across all different industries, but the industry that I think is worst at doing stuff proactively is the trades industry of all the industries that we work with. And that mindset that you mentioned is definitely prevalent in terms of, people not wanting to think about law as an upfront preventative measure, but more, something's gone wrong, now I'm going to go see the lawyers sort of thing. A big message, and certainly it was in our founding message when we started the business, was legal headaches can be avoided by being proactive, and it's a big message that we are trying to get out to smaller businesses. And again, this is known well by larger businesses. They all have in-house lawyers, they avoid risks, and even in other industries, medical industry and so on, they're much better. I guess they're in the business of health, and for example, they know about the power of preventing the risk of illness, so it's natural for them to think about risk proactively. The advantage of getting your ducks in order kind of before things go wrong is that you can prevent things going wrong. In disputes, what we often see go wrong is, two parties are having a fight about something, whether it's payment or a job not done, or you told me you're going to do this, but you didn't actually do that. Having a clear agreement at the beginning actually makes it clear to both parties what's expected, and the dispute never happens. It's not just that you would turn to the document and use it. I mean, it's helpful for that too as a way of resolving the dispute, but you actually avoid the dispute altogether. I kind of think, there's many reasons why you might use a lawyer, but the biggest one is this risk management. I think it's like risks happen in business, things go wrong, things are all fine every day. You might do the same job 100 times, but on the 101st, it goes wrong. And that can really bring the whole house kind of falling down. And I think if you are at least aware of what your legal risks are and do what you can to mitigate them up front, first of all, you can sleep easier at night, but second of all, you're going to avoid these kind of potentially business ending catastrophes that can happen down the line.
Alex, I think there's a lot of pub chat about what can go wrong, and everybody's heard a horror story. So there's two schools of camp. In my experience, it'll never happen to me, which is flawed, of course. And then the school of thought, I believe very much is it's something that I'll deal with if it ever happens to me. And the problem is neither of those preventative measures work, because you end up getting in trouble. And then, of course, naturally, something we've referenced previously on the podcast, it's far more expensive to get yourself out of trouble than it is to spend a bit of time and a bit of money and a bit of energy preventing the issues from happening, from something as simple as setting expectations, which is very much what I'm hearing when you're talking about doing some of that preventative work and outlining what's necessary for that healthy client tradie interaction. Have you had the same sort of experience generally when you're talking to clients that arrive on your doorstep and require help?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of what we do is, someone will come, often for a very specific requirement that they think is important because they need a clients ask them for a contract. They never did one before. Oh man, I need to get a contract done. And we actually asked them about their business generally. And we realized that this is the least of their problems. There are all these other issues. And they said, oh no, it hasn't come up. I've been in business for 5 years. This hasn't been an issue. So why would I bother dealing with this? Or you waste money on that stuff, blah, blah, blah. And, it's like, there's many different analogies, but, it's like this mindset of I'll wait for something to go wrong before I deal with it is like, I'll get my brakes fitted on my car after I've crashed. It's like, well, if you have the brakes, you won't crash. Do you know what I mean? So I think, it's this risk management mindset of like 5 years go by, nothing goes wrong, but every day you exist, the probability that it will happen, goes up, right? Yes, it's unlikely in your first week of doing business that things will go wrong. But make that 20 years and, it's going to become likely. And if you make this one-off investment, for example, in a proper contract at the beginning, it gives you that longevity. And maybe another comment on that, one thing we help a lot of businesses work through, because, lawyers are expensive and we have really tried to bring down the cost in our model, but we're not free. It costs money to get these things done. And if, speak to any lawyer, they'll give you a long list of everything that you technically should be doing and signing and so on. And it's just unrealistic for a small business or to really tick off everything on their to-do list. What you want to work out is, what are, in my business, the critical risks that are most likely to occur. And, what are the things that are business ending and what are nice to have. And you can break down your legal risks and to-dos using that matrix. And actually, you might find that there's maybe just 3 really important things you need to do. And over time, you can, knock out the rest of the to-do list as your business grows and so on. But at least rather than going law in general, I won't deal with, going, okay, well, maybe I'll just figure out what the key items are for my business now that I'm gonna cover. And again, insurance is a different industry, but it is an analogous way of thinking, which people understand more intuitively. You could get insured for every single possible thing in your car. You can get comprehensive third party. You can get CTP. You can insure from theft. You can insure your steering wheel if you want. But people make a decision based on their car and how much money they have and to pick certain insurances. But most people do get some insurance. So it's the same with the contracts. It's picking out which insurances, if you will, you're gonna take out in terms of being proactive with your legal services. Yeah.
Alex, I think that's the most practical piece of advice I've ever heard someone in your position give. And I say that really enthusiastically because what, in my experience, I've seen time and time again is a pretty simple trade business going to somebody like yourself for some help and they're being totally oversold on a bunch of stuff that they don't need, and they walk out with this massive bill, and it just contributes to the fear around talking to someone like yourself. And yet, if they were to do that audit process that you're talking about, let's look at the 3 to 5 most risky areas within our business that we need protection from, it makes this a really simplified conversation that can turn into a more elaborate one over time. But I don't have to fear coming to you thinking I'm walking out with a $25,000 bill and what have I really got for my money? So I think that was a really practical example. Is it always on a case-by-case basis that you look at what is necessary for a business, or are there some blanket things that we should be considering for all trade businesses?
So case by case will definitely help identify, specific weightings for what's more risky and so on. But there's a handful of things that I'd say for trades businesses in particular are very likely to be at the top of that list of things that you should sort out. And one of them is your kind of business structure, the way you're set up, whether you're a company or a sole trader, just making sure you've got the right structure. Another is around your key contracts with customers and employees. And the third is your brand name and kind of protecting that. Those 3 things are, like, I'd say the 3 biggest missing items that we see with trades businesses, and also some of the most important that I think apply quite broadly. Yeah.
And some of those aren't terribly expensive. We worked with an electrical business for a period of time, and unfortunately, that business had done nothing to protect their business name and had another business move into the same geographical area with the same business name. And he was constantly fielding calls from dissatisfied clients. And it could have been so simply worked out in the beginning. But of course, now he had to then go back, and there was all the work that needed to be done to establish you had the business name in the first place. It became quite an arduous thing to work through rather than something very simple that can be done right from the very beginning.
For sure. I mean, that one in particular, the fail to register your brand name or check if the brand name's available. I wrote a kind of almost op-ed post on our website, after doing this for about 6-7 years. Just the amount of times I heard that story happen, and it all could have been prevented. It was like I wanted to make a public service announcement to every small business out there. Just get the name protected. I mean, we as lawyers, if you look at what we did when we set up our business, it's almost like the gold standard for what you would do when you set up yours. And number 1 was get the company registered. Number 2 was the brand name. Before we'd even done anything, launched the website, we just made sure we had the brand name before we started investing in collateral and growing. You want to make sure you own it, otherwise there's going to be big issues. So yeah, that one I think is really, really key for sure.
I feel like a lot of issues come from tradies, especially just being overly optimistic. We see this with the way they book up their week from a time perspective. And I'm sorry, not sorry to any of you listeners if this is you and I'm poking you in the sore spot. But it's like stacking the week with jobs and assuming that things are going to go well, even though they're not going to. You still book yourself up. Don't allow enough travel time. Don't allow any buffer time for jobs that don't go to plan. The concrete truck's late, or someone breaks something and it's got to be fixed, or you forgot that you've got to go to the optometrist this week. And I feel like that attitude carries into contractual dealings with clients, where there's just this really naive assumption that things will go to plan and people will pay their bills and they're not going to come back at you for stuff on a job. And so a big area we certainly see with trade business owners is just not having stuff in writing. They issue a quote and then the client says, yeah, that's great, let's go, for a $12,000 job. And it's like, there's nothing on paper that they even said, yes, go ahead with it. And yes, I accept your quote. And yes, I'm going to pay you on completion of the job. And then when it does turn to custard, there's like this exasperated tradie that's like, oh, I can't believe these people, they're not paying their bill. And it could have all been saved with an email, let alone a piece of paper with a signature on it. Do you see that as well, Alex? And is that a problem that's as easily fixed as I think it is?
You're completely spot on. And again, it's almost specific to the trades industry. I mean, all industries kind of have that problem. They'll just do handshake deals. But even other industries, you at least get them, building their own, I wouldn't use them, but building their own template agreements. They know they need something. But yeah, trades businesses in particular, I think, just and it's like it's very far from the skill set of a lot of trades is sitting in Microsoft Word and thinking about the fine print of a legal document. So I understand why no one wants to do it. It's very understandable, but nonetheless, it's very easily avoided. And one thing that I think can get through to some of these businesses, and certainly we've seen this in fact, some of the more successful trades businesses that are our clients. So yes, contracts. I kind of talked a lot about how doing them up front is great for risk management. But as you were just kind of touching on, it's actually a way to increase your revenue and reduce your costs and make your business more profitable. Because first of all, we as lawyers, we know how to structure these documents. We know how to handle people that don't pay on time. Maybe you're going to charge interest on late payments. We know how to reduce the scope of your services. So when people say, oh, why didn't you fix this? Come back 7 times and do this and that. You can charge more for those things, and it's clear how that works. And again, you might think, I have a good intuition for how much my clients will pay, and none of that's going to add value. They're going to pay what they're going to pay. But the reality is, if you present them with a well-organized document with a clear quote and a clear additional fee section, the average consumer or business, doesn't matter whether it's a business or individual client, will be happy to pay more than they thought when they understand why and they understand they agreed to it up front.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's a lot more efficient because you're not going to get stuck on a job turning down other jobs for 3 months because one little issue with a client, you need to keep them happy. So all these things are going to increase your productivity. You're going to get more jobs done in a month, and they're going to increase your revenue per job, and they're probably going to reduce your costs and your own happiness in your business. So there's a lot of benefits, and all we're talking about is a nice, well-structured document or client contract that you have up front.
Alex, we try not to talk over the top of each other, and we do it all the time. Alex, I'm sitting listening to you and thinking about a lot of what we've seen in the trade space. And what I do see is those who are proactive generally go for something that is standardized in terms of contracts or agreements that they have within their business, terms and conditions, and the list goes on. How important is it to have something that is tailored and specific to me and my business? And what's the difference between the two in terms of risk level?
So it depends what standardized document. So let me say, as a starting point, I would recommend if your business can standardize its document to use with all your customers, it's a good idea. It's cost effective, saves you going to lawyers every time to get a document done up. Obviously, if you're doing a multi-million-dollar job, you might want to do a tailored contract. But depending on your business model, if you can support a standardized agreement, it's super efficient. And I would be an advocate of that. And we do a lot of those. In terms of where you get that standardized agreement from, I would generally recommend just investing once in a legal service to get one set up for your business. There are, industry templates. There's Masters Builder Association templates, depending on which sub-trade you're in. There's, specific associations that will give you their own templates. And they're generally better than nothing unless you picked the wrong one for your job, in which case it actually becomes possibly worse than not having one. And that's again, a common risk that we see. I would say, pretty much every time we've helped a trades business design their standard agreement, we've added some non-trivial section to the document that wouldn't have been in those standardized, like download off the internet templates. I would suggest, we're talking about a one-off investment in legal fees for all of your customer jobs. If you can standardize everything, it's just generally worth it. And again, like, you may have your own billing model, your own billing structure. You may have your own set of issues that you are seeing come up with your clients again and again and again. And you can talk about those specifically in your terms, where the templates are by nature designed to be used across, tons and tons of different business types, and they may not suit your size or your scale and so on. So those are the kinds of things that we're putting in there. And so I think you're going to get more of those benefits in terms of both reducing risks, but also those efficiencies and, cost savings and so on, the more specific you can make it to your business.
I look at this stuff and because I have part of my history was in finance and financial planning and wealth management, everything's about return on investment. And any of our listeners, if you've invested in property or shares or anything like that, you've thought about what's your return on investment. And I look at, insurance and in particular the legal side of things and having these legal instruments set up in your business, the return on investment is enormous, like in the positive sense, because for whatever the cost is, you know, it's 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, depending on what the heck it is that you're putting in place. If it's something that you can use over and over again and it prevents $10,000 loss on a job, because as you said earlier, and we've heard stories of this as well, obviously, you get called back by the client 7, 10, 15 times to fix stuff, and you do it because that's your own version of risk management, right? Because like if you don't and they take you to the authorities, then that's like, whoa, that gets really expensive. And all that can be prevented for, you know, thousands, not tens of thousands of dollars. And you can prevent that many, many times over. So it's just the ROI on that stuff is insanely good, way better than going to the Melbourne Cup.
Yeah, indeed. It's a good way of putting it. And yes, I mean, you know, it's I've heard a phrase said in business. You know, people buy things for three reasons. You know, to make money, to save money, and to reduce risk. And at least in the case of these customer contracts that we're now talking about, it does all three, right? So it's like it's giving you three types of return on your investment. So yeah, big advocate of those things. And you know, like the cost of these documents, it depends on your business and, you know, the complexity of jobs, but we're talking a couple of grand is what you're looking at for getting, at least with us, that's kind of what we're charging as a one-off investment. So, you know, yeah, it really isn't going to be, hopefully won't send you bankrupt. Yeah.
It'll prevent it, hopefully.
Exactly.
Alex, this might be a weird question to answer, but is it actually all that hard to create a written contract, written agreements, you know, quote acceptances, all those sorts of things, T's and C's? Obviously, we've talked about your solution. I'm not advocating that. I'm not suggesting our listeners go to Google and just copy and paste something, because that is an absolute freaking disaster. Don't do that. We've seen people do that, and it's a nightmare. But is it actually that hard to put this stuff in place? You know, practically, when I go back to my tradie business and I've paid you guys some money and so, okay, I got these things, it feels like it could be a lot of work to actually make that part of the way I do business with clients.
Yeah, I think, you know, technology has made a lot of this stuff a lot easier to operationalize. And, you know, a lot of the work we do for trades businesses is around these customer agreements we're just talking about. And someone's come in and told them they should be doing electronic signatures and sending stuff out. And they're just like, okay, we need to get our contracts in order. The process of setting that up is not hard. There's tons of tools, DocuSign, PandaDoc, all these things that make it really easy to send out contracts. And then you just insert the contract that, you know, has been prepared for your business. And you just build a process to make sure every client, you know, receives it on their phone or email and clicks a button to accept and, you know, pays their invoice or whatever. And you can build it into the way you collect payments and other sorts of things as well. So it's if you're not tech savvy, you know, maybe you need to get an IT person to help you set some of it up, but it's definitely not rocket science. And you know, it can really be done in 2 days to set up a lot of the infrastructure to get this stuff going. In terms of like the preparing of a document yourself as part of that process, you know, I mean, we've got ChatGPT now where you could ask it, write me a contract for my, you know, electrician business and, you know, make sure it covers all these things and you'll get something back. I'm a avid user of that technology. But in the case of these kind of contracts, it's not going to produce anything that's going to really hit the nail on the head in terms of what we're talking about, risk reduction and efficiencies. Again, I hesitate to even say it's better than nothing because at the moment, at least with the LLM technology, it's producing American law stuff that doesn't really work here and can have unintended consequences. And then, you know, a lot of the, you know, with the legal wording, I mean, lawyers train for X years to learn about law and how to write these carefully constructed sentences that seem like gibberish. But in terms of particularly the risk component, if you use the wrong set of words or it's not Australian or whatever it is, it makes the whole clause not only potentially unenforceable, but you might be breaking, like, for example, the Australian consumer laws. And then, you know, you can get fined by the ACCC or complained to. So there's these risks with just self-servicing. So it's not that hard to work with a lawyer. You know, we would get these things done in a week, and you know, other lawyers would be the same. And then the surrounding process is not that hard. So I really think it is not that daunting to get on top of.
Alex, I've had some pushback and some fear from some tradies that are concerned about the way their terms and conditions or some of these contracts would be perceived by their potential clients. And the fear around, well, my client's not going to work with me if they've got to sign off on those 53 terms and conditions. How do you get around that? And what, maybe the question is simple as, what do you have to say to that?
It's a great question, and we get that a lot. And I think it's not. It's a very important question to ask. I wouldn't dismiss that question. I would say that's actually the key question in terms of how we design your agreement. And again, depending on who your client is and what kind of work you do, some clients might be impressed by a robust looking contract that adds a layer of professionalism. Others might be suspicious. And there's a trade-off, and this is part of the value of working with lawyers when preparing these documents in terms of risk protection and practicality. And that's a big part of what we do. We go, look, I would love to write you a 100-page contract that covers every possible risk, but no one's going to sign it. So it's not actually going to cover any possible risk. In fact, it's going to create risk because your business will probably never make a sale again. So what we have to do is design an agreement in a format and in a procedure that is seamless with the client's operations. But for trades businesses, quite commonly, will attach it to an invoice, and it'll say, by paying this invoice, you agree to the terms and conditions, which, signatures are better, but under the way law works in Australia, acceptance by conduct is perfectly valid. So, you can do things like that, or you can have a tick box somewhere, or you can attach it to an email. You can use certain font sizes that get things in 2 pages, and then you just have the key terms summarized on the bottom of an invoice or in an email. There's creative ways to present this stuff, and again, it's not rocket science. For us, for example, we've got maybe 5 different ways that we commonly help trades businesses do their agreements. The most common, I would say, is we give them a sort of 4 or 5 page template, and again, this is more for small trades businesses, with a cover page that they just fill in for each client, send over either as a PDF attachment, or they just get it digitally signed. And it's straightforward, and people aren't that off put by it. So, so again, I think it is an important question, and a lot of kind of what you are paying a lawyer to help you work out how to do, but definitely solvable, and you can turn that actually into a strength if done correctly.
Okay, I have another negative Nancy question from, I'm just thinking about tradies and the kind of fear that they've brought to this conversation with me before. And we've actually had someone in our community that trusted a lawyer to put together a contract for them, and when it went to court, or it got that far as court, it didn't stand up and it wasn't what they needed it to be. How do I, as a trade business owner and a consumer, be sure about the end product that I'm paying for?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think maybe just to directly address that particular scenario, I mean, you generally do have, if you use a solicitor or a lawyer to draft your agreement, some right against them if there's an issue with their document. We as law firms are all required to have PI insurance. So, the documents are actually insurance backed, and so you can have some protection if that particular issue emerges. Ideally, though, that issue does not emerge, and you get a well-drafted contract, so you're not having to make cross claims and time-consuming things. I will say this: you hear the horror stories. There was a study that came out that said in Australia, something like 98% of small business disputes were resolved without going to court. And so I would say, people often think of a legal document as its value in terms of risk management is what the judge says when you present it in court. But actually what we see happen is, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, disputes are avoided because things are in writing, or when disputes emerge, the parties have a reference point, which is the document that they can use. So in a sense, it may not matter whether, one clause, a judge might interpret it one way or another. If it's clear enough to both parties, you actually find that dispute gets resolved amicably, over email or over a phone call. And given that, like I said, 98% are being resolved that way, you might argue that that's actually the primary purpose of a contract, is to have something in writing that's certain, that's enforceable. Now, of course, as the disputes escalate, the wording starts to matter, because, if lawyers are involved, they'll be arguing about what a judge might say in terms of settlement. So not to say you can ignore the wording. It's all about having something over email. But certainly, I'd say that's it's important to think of it that way. But of course, if you do end up in a situation with a document you paid a lawyer for that can't be enforced in court, I would be very annoyed by that. And again, make sure you select your lawyers carefully. And you can always choose Sprint Law, and everything will be fine. So there you go.
Nice, Alex.
There's the plug. Nice work.
That's the plug.
Alex, I have a question that I have been asking our guests on the podcast here for over a decade now. And that is, if you had 1,000 trade business owners in a room, what's one piece of advice you'd like to leave them with?
I don't want to harp on about the point we've discussed this whole call, but really it is that get a customer contract, get a client agreement, a standard client agreement. Just get it. If you don't have one, or if you're using an online template or something, just get it done, because it is in your kinds of businesses, it is a really, really important document. I mean, it's important in any kind of business, but for trades businesses in particular, it's got your payment, it's got your service scope, it's got your risk protection. It's all there in this document, and these are the most common issues we see. So I would get that document done, I would throw in there as a asterisk, at the risk of having two things. Get your brand name protected and your business structure sorted too. Those are the other two, but really just get that customer contract sorted. And if you do that, that's one of the top items on your risk management to-do list. Your business will be better the next day for sure.
Nice, mate. It was like one main point with a sub-clause.
Yes, that's very, very. That's what I was seeing in my head. I was seeing A, sub-clause I.
One, sub-clause A. Yeah, nice. All right, gang. Alex, if our listeners have sat through that and gone, holy crap, that sounds a lot less painless than I thought, I should really do something about this, and they want to choose a good solicitor or law firm, can you recommend one, and what would their details be?
Not sure, but I have heard of these guys called Sprint Law, who I believe are an award-winning, fast-growing Australian law business. Yeah, no. If people want to reach out to us, sprintlaw.com.au, check out our website, and you can give us a call or submit an inquiry, and the team will be, as the name suggests, on the phone with you same day usually.
Nice. Now, and I can confirm, listeners, if you're doing the podcast and not the video version of this, Alex is not wearing a grey suit.
I'm wearing glasses. That's
He has lots of hair. There's no Brill cream in sight, and I can't see a fancy leather couch and a whiskey bottle on the bureau behind you there, mate. So
they're under the table, but yes.
The whiskey's for after you have the problem clients.
Exactly.
Mate, thanks for being on the podcast. Great chat. And yeah, look, to reiterate, gang, if you don't have some of those fundamentals in place, honestly, you are just dicing with all sorts of risks. To be honest, these days, you're an idiot if you don't have this stuff in place. You're just risking everything. So reach out to the team at Sprint Law, get your stuff together, and stop being a clown. Alex, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Hooroo.